This week, the New York Times released a story on foreign influences in China. The report is closely tied to a new report by Australian government-funded think tank, ASPI. Both poorly aim to say one thing, that some foreigners in China are tools of the CPC, used to spread evil propaganda. Today, I'll show you how flawed their argument really is. Let's get reporting. Hello, 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。This week, the New York Times released a story titled, How Beijing Influences the Influencers. They worked in coordination with the authors of a report from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, or ASPI, called Borrowing Mouths to Speak on Xinjiang. Both tried to claim that an evil web of Chinese propaganda is spreading its tentacles around the world thanks to the help of a concerted effort between the CPC and foreign influencers. The ASPI report even literally created a scary spiderweb-like diagram to ultimately try and paint that picture. Hey look, there's me. I'm not going to dive too much into these reports today, but in a nutshell, they both attempt to argue the following. 1. That foreigners in China should not be allowed to post positive content about China. 2. That foreigners posting positive content about China have been compromised by the CPC. 3. That any positive content from China is necessarily false and should be labelled as disinformation. And 4. That content from foreign influencers being shared by Chinese government accounts is evidence of links between those influencers and the CPC. The first 3 points basically suggest that any good or positive content from China is fake and paid for by the CPC, which basically says that life here is completely miserable and that no content made in China should exist without also mentioning allegations of mass genocide and human rights abuses. The reports both criticise foreign content creators who visited Xinjiang, for example, and showed a wholly positive image of life in Xinjiang, without mentioning allegations from the West about genocide, torture, and so on. The New York Times, for example, accused the Barretts, a father and son duo from the UK who live in China and run a YouTube channel, of painting cheery portraits of their lives in China. Shock horror, they love China, that's why they live here. What ASPI and the New York Times are basically saying here is that positive content and good news from China does not and should not exist. That is literally the core message. Think about that for a second. I'll give you a US example to show how ludicrous that thinking is. I think everyone can agree that the US completely screwed up in response to COVID-19. Already around 800,000 people have died. That's nearly 1 million people. In any normal person's mind, that amount of deaths in nearly 2 years is a great tragedy. Yet good news still manages to feature on news reports from the US. Travel vloggers still visit cities and tourist spots around the country, showing happy-go-lucky trips featuring entertainment, good food, and what ASPI calls a wholly positive image of life. None of these videos suddenly cut to a depressing segment on the bad COVID response and how 800,000 have died, and nor should they be expected to. So why do Western media and so-called think tanks have such expectations of China? Chicago is, in many people's estimations, a lawless, dangerous place. Innocent people are shot and killed there every single week. Does that mean that a travel vlogger can't visit Chicago and talk about the city's bars, amazing food, local culture, and personalities? Of course not. So why do they expect the same from Chinese content? I was included in ASPI's Xinjiang report as a foreign influencer, tangled up in China's extensive, evil web of propaganda, because of my travel videos in Kashgar and Urumqi. Because my videos, designed to entice travellers to the region to explore with their own eyes, didn't mention the hideous, baseless allegations of widespread mass murder and genocide, ASPI want to label my content disinformation, and they're asking Silicon Valley to have it blocked. Now that is scary. The last point ASPI and the New York Times tried to make is that because our content was shared by Chinese government entities, it goes to show that there's a huge propaganda network seeking to hide some hideous truth that needs to be stopped. ASPI are claiming that this spiderweb map that they created shows the CPC are trying to reframe the narrative about Xinjiang. Well, of course they are, because China has flat out denied claims of genocide, and even the US government failed to give evidence they claim to have about crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. Why? Because it doesn't exist. If ASPI and the New York Times have their way, no good or happy news will ever be allowed to reach the eyes of Westerners on news reports or on social media. They want to hold the absolute monopoly on truth and be able to continue portraying China as evil and murderous to fit their own agenda. And what is that agenda? Well, just look at ASPI's funders to see the answer. See you guys next time.